Hello and welcome to episode 15 of my Mostly Stock Career. Today we're going to be doing something, or we're going to be starting to do something I should say, and it involves something we've been planning to do for a little while. And that is going to be exploring Duna, and then of course exploring Ike. So I did pick up a couple contracts involving these two, or at least what we're going to be doing is related to them. For example, we had Fly by Duna, build a new surface outpost on Duna. This is one of them. Technically, we're not going to be doing this one because this launch that we're sending out is for science, and all of the vessels are designed to get us lots of science. So the surface outpost is actually something we're going to be launching after our science vessel, while the science vessels are kind of on their way. We're going to be creating these ones and launching them, along with, of course, there was another one for a surface outpost on Ike, which is, of course, the same idea. Maybe we'll launch them together, but we'll have to see. So we're going to grab these two, explore Duna, we'll accept it, and explore Ike. We'll take both of them because we're going to be exploring both of them. Now, there's been a couple days. Well, what do we have over here? I did something. Okay, so I just extracted ore from Minmis. I knew I didn't actually click this because I've been playing in this world, designing a bunch of craft off recording, so I wanted to make sure I didn't forget anything, and that's why I left that there. But we extracted some ore from Minmis. It literally just required me to go there and start mining ore with our miner, and we get some funds for it, so we can close that now. So what I have been working on is a bunch of stuff, and mostly the kind of base design on what's going on. Now, I'll probably be tweaking these a little bit when I put them up for launching, but I like to, when I'm assembling some kind of craft, I like to assemble it in parts that I can see in the VAB when it's all built together. So let's load up this thing. Now this is the Duna Science Core, unfinished, and I've actually changed this, so this piece actually doesn't belong anymore because I figured out a much better way of doing that, whereas I can just put a docking node down there. And the reason I did that is because that was very unstable. It's too tall, it makes it very wobbly when I try to fire the main drive engine down here. So let's do these couple of tweaks, because I had made a couple tweaks, I just forgot to save them apparently. Let's see. Put a couple of these on the sides for extra fuel, of course. And we need to put the fuel lines in so that we can get enough delta V, so that we can actually make it, because just these top tanks don't have enough delta V when the thing's fully built to get to Duna, so I needed to add a little extra fuel, and this is plenty. Next, we're going to take our docking port, and we're just going to put two of them right on the bottom of the tank, and then open up the maneuver tool, and just pull these over to the edge, not so that they clip out of the edge, but so that they're just barely there, and that's actually clipping a little bit, so we'll move it in, there we go. It doesn't have to be perfect, just it gives me a little more space to work with when I'm trying to dock against this engine. And aside from that, there are just two more of these that we put down, and they're going to be going probably, where would be a good spot? Right about here, I'm thinking would be good enough. So right about there on the science module, it'll block one of the windows, but I don't think the Kerbals will mind too much. And let's actually look at this now. Now we're going to open up our sub-assemblies, because that's where I've basically saved everything. Now the Duna lander, which is this piece right here, this is what's going to be sticking itself to the bottom of this area down here. And it doesn't really matter too much which way they face, so I'm going to have them face outwards. And we're going to dock two of these because we want to land both in kind of the center, equatorial landing of Duna, and then of course on the poles of Duna, and they're equipped with all of the science that we currently have, all of the different science experiments, and we're going to be sticking scientists in them to do the landings. Now I don't think I put in a probe, so actually we don't need to stick a scientist in because there's not that many biomes, we just need to collect one set of each science, so I think we'll probably stick pilots in them actually, instead of scientists, but we're going to be bringing plenty of Kerbals. But these two are going to dock like this. I've already tested this, so that these landing legs will not interfere with this engine unless I deploy the landing legs. Then they might. I didn't test that, but just as they are, the engine's fine, and since they're just going to be transported this way, then it should be okay. Now, of course, I could always dock these at a different angle. So if, say, I docked it with the jump-in seat, the side that you actually climb in on the inside, then there's much less chance of anything getting burnt off. So I might dock it this way, or at some different, more obscure angle, not these perfect 90-degree angles. So we have these. I'm actually going to remind myself to put down struts and finish building this thing, actually. So what did I have on here? I had this fuel tank pointed inward, and then on top of that I think I just used a nose cone. Actually, we could use one of those slanted nose cones to keep with the slant effect. That'll be fine. So we have our 2 Duna landers for our sub-assemblies, and if we go back we have plenty more. We have the Duna refinery, which is right here, which we're going to land on Duna, and it is a refinery. It's going to dock right like this. Of course, we'll do little editings like fix the landing legs, and those pipes that you see spin out, those will be fixed when we actually do the launches, since they are saved as sub-assemblies, but of course they'll be put into their own craft eventually. Then we have this, which is going to sit right on top, which is designed to land on Duna. It's got some parachutes. Well, it had some parachutes. Maybe it doesn't have parachutes anymore. Maybe I replaced them by mistake. Yeah, I'm not going to worry about it too much right now. I can leave it as is. See, the sub-assemblies do some weird stuff. But we'll probably replace these with parachutes instead so that it will have some parachutes. On this top node, what we're going to be putting is the Ike lander, which is just a smaller version of the Duna lander, and it's going to land on Ike, of course, with all of the science we currently have available to us, and it's going to take all of the science it can. It's going to dock up top like that. However, I can't actually dock with this docking port. Even if I open it up, I can't dock. So that's just where it's going to go relative on this craft. And then we have 2 more things. Since we want to be able to mine resources, we're going to be putting 2 scanning probes out around Duna and Ike. One for Duna, one for Ike, and those are going to dock just like that. So this is ultimately what our ship is going to look like when it's fully assembled in space. Of course, each bit is going to be launched on its own. I might be able to get away with launching the 2 probes in one launch because they're rather small, but most of the other pieces are going to be launched on their own. So it's going to take quite a few launches to build it, but once we get the thing built, it will be able to go to Duna and gather pretty much all the science, and probably end up being, Duna and Ike, and it'll probably end up being enough science that we might just be able to complete out our research and development center, as well as complete some of the contracts. So this is the general build, the base build that I'm going to be going with. So we're going to be launching some of the pieces now, and by some of the pieces I mean just this center piece. So let's remove all of the little pieces, all these sub-assemblies that of course will get their own launches. And this is just the core. This is the thing that's actually going to be going off of Duna. Now the trick about the engine is, even though it looks like we have a thrust-to-weight ratio of 1.1, even with all of this here, this thing can't launch itself, because if you go to atmospheric, now its thrust-to-weight ratio is cut in half because it needs to get out of the atmosphere before this big engine can actually be useful. So if we stick this on atmospheric, we need to find some way to get about 1500 delta V on this craft before this engine up here becomes useful. And the easiest way to do that would very likely just be a bunch of solid rocket boosters. Or we can just use, how about this? We'll do something else. We'll go with, actually that's a rather small decoupler. Do we have the bigger decoupler? I don't know, to be honest. If we have the 3.75 meter decoupler, is this? Yes, we do, actually. There we go. We'll put that down. We will close that because we don't need it open anymore. Grab some 3.5 meter engines, and then grab the, well, one tank, and then grab the biggest engine we own, which I want to say is this one. And let's see. That engine currently only has, wow, that's actually really hard to lift, isn't it? It's only got 851. I bet if we just tack some solid rocket boosters, onto this, it'll be fine. Now the reason I don't want to just stick solid rocket boosters on the edge of this is because the decouplers will leave pieces behind, and I didn't want to have any pieces left behind by the decouplers. So by putting it on this bottom stage, which is something we're going to be dropping anyway, then I can easily just stick them on and not have to worry about the decouplers. So we'll stick those down there and get the big SRB, which is this one, the kickback. We'll just put 8 of them on, just like that. Hopefully they'll be able to survive. Probably lower them. That way they don't interfere with the thing up here when I put a cone on them, since we do want this to be as aerodynamic as possible. Stick all of it down there. We'll stage those out. They'll probably end up staging at the same time, so we'll just assume 1400 delta V at about 2 thrust to weight ratio. I think that'll get me high enough for my big engine to then be useful, since we just need to get about between 10 and 1500, 10 and 15 kilometers in order for this to be useful. And because there's going to be a lot of forces, we will just strut these things to the actual rocket so that they don't go flying off. And we'll strut them to the engine as well, because the bottom parts are usually what try to peel away from the rocket. Now, I'm just hoping that these things don't generate so much heat that the thing overheats on the engines, but we'll have to test that. Now, I know it weighs more to do this, but it's also significantly more aerodynamic. We're going to take the shielded docking port instead of the regular docking port. Even though the shielded docking port weighs more, we definitely are going to be able to do it since we have more than enough delta V, and we can refuel when we get there. So I'm just, like I said, I'm adding the last little bit of touches because I said before we launch these, we're going to do a couple little things just to make sure that they're going to work fine and dandy, so that everything will be set. And we'll attach that there. Now those should be nice and set for attachment. Now I'm actually considering, could I stick this same fuel thing down here and have it bend outward? I suppose it'd still line up on the very edge because the docking port would line up with the top of it, and it might actually work a little bit better. Let's grab this and lower it. Move those out. How about we actually test that to see if that's going to be useful or work? It'll give us a little more fuel. Not that we really need it, but it might actually look cooler. It not necessarily look cooler, but be easier to dock with. I suppose it could work. We just have to rotate these solid rocket boosters so they're not in the way. Maybe, even then, we could do that for the little probes. That way everything's kind of in this stack. Yeah, I think we'll do this instead, because the stack would make it so that there's less chance of them bending and like flapping back and forth like a pair of wings while we're trying to fly this thing. So we'll just add more struts because there's going to be a lot of weight on these things, so we don't want them to accidentally get ripped off from the main engine. So we'll do this instead. Looks kind of like a pair of bananas on its side, but we'll survive. And we'll just rotate or move these ever so slightly. All 8 of them. Here's a good test. We'll stick some on the side like that, and then we'll see if we can't sneak 4 in on the actual fuel tank engine area. I just don't want them clipping, because if they clip then they'll take engines with them. So yeah, we'll just go with this. We'll just put them on the engines right at the node attach point, or on the SRBs right at where they attach to the main rocket. That way there's less chance of them being broken by it. And we'll reattach our struts, and we'll save this thing as its own and push the launch button. Push the launch button until it works. And now we get to do the real fun, where we get to launch giant pieces of metal into space and see if it's going to work. Will you hold under your own weight? You will. How useful. And it's a night launch, which means we'll probably get better frames since there's less light in our way. And I literally just turned that up and then turned it down by accidentally clicking the wrong button. We'll sort out the crew later. I know we have 3 Kerbals in here, but I'm not going to worry about them because this is going into the orbit of Kerbin for now. We'll move it to Minmus later. I'm not sure if we're going to construct in Kerbin's orbit or if we're going to construct in Minmus's orbit. I think we'll construct in Kerbin's orbit and send a hauler to go get fuel for it because it's going to need to be refueled before it actually heads off to Duna. And we're messing up stuff already. Let's just revert that because I didn't focus on my staging. Like a true genius. Always make sure your staging is right. I thought mine was, but apparently it wasn't. So we'll grab these. I completely forgot about the launch clamps. Now the thing should go. 3, 2, 1. So far, so good. We just need to get to altitude, and then the main engine bit has, I want to say, 3,500 to 4,000 delta V, this big engine, because this thing's actually really efficient in space. So with all this fuel, it's got tons of delta V. It's got about 2,500 when the thing's fully built, so when it's bare bones and not any of the stuff attached to it, it should have a lot more. So our goal is just to get past that point where it loses so much thrust to weight ratio when it's down in the atmosphere because it's not at sea level type engine. So we're just going to go straight up. We're not going to worry about gravity turns or anything. Actually, we're accelerating really fast. I didn't expect to reach this speed with this engine. I guess we are, well, this engine's probably getting more thrust as we go up too, isn't it? Yeah, it is. It's just gaining thrust quite rapidly, to be honest. So we're going to throttle it down, try and keep us from going too fast. We'll keep throttling down. We'll let the SRBs burn out and we'll start turning once they do. So, solid fuel almost spent. Good. And full throttle stage. Hopefully that'll let us peel away from those so nothing gets broken or damaged. And I think we've made it. Now, I'm concerned that this engine's going to pull fuel. Well, it's not. Apparently this is doing its job by disabling crossfeed. So we'll just burn up the rest of this engine. We can actually use this to help us get in orbit. I haven't used Flight Engineer to get into an orbit for quite a while because I haven't actually had it available. So that peels away. No damage. Good. And we'll fire off this engine. Let's see. Are you at pretty... Yep, this is at its max, almost 2,000 kilonewtons is its max thrust, so we're high enough up for it to be useful. Which means we can start our gravity turn. And it's got really good gimbal. I hope that doesn't... I suppose I can disable it if I think it's going to start to mess with the Duna ship that we're going to be creating, because the gimbal can cause the Duna ship to try and bend, and since it's going to be really tall with a lot of docking ports in the middle, bending is not something that'd be good for that ship. So we might disable the gimbal and rely on RCS and other means, SAS, to turn us, since that'll turn us more evenly than gimbal will. And let's make sure fuel flow is working. These both should these both are emptying out first, and then the orange tank's going to empty out. And then it's going to start emptying our top stage, which is exactly how we want the fuel to flow. So our apoapsis is about 80. We're probably going to construct this in a little bit higher of an orbit. I'm going to aim for 100. And not because it's... The reason I want to go up to 100, I should say, is because I want to be able to rendezvous with these easier than something at 70. Plus, since we're going to be constructing it, we don't have any other craft at 100, I don't think. So we won't have to worry about anything else kind of being in the way. Actually, what happened to all this stuff? Maybe I removed some of it, or there was just no debris in the way. I don't know. We're going to go to 100, regardless of the reason, I guess, because that's where we're going to go. I thought we had more stuff in orbit around Kerbin. Apparently not. Maybe I'm thinking Minmus or the moon, because we do have a lot of stuff crowding that area. Oh, we're going to be putting a lot of stuff into orbit. once we get up there. There we go, the first piece is in orbit, and it's pretty stable. It works well, and now it's time to go get some of the other pieces. We'll deploy one of the solar panels so it doesn't accidentally run out of power. We of course have an engineer in case any landing legs break on some of our lander craft. We got Jebediah, who's going to be the main pilot, and probably the first one on Duna, maybe? I guess he'll have to compete with Val on who actually gets to go to Duna first. Or land on Duna first with the 2 landers. They'll both probably take one, though. And we'll send Bill with the miner craft, the extractor, whatever you want to call it. The thing that's going to go down and mine us more ore so that we can refuel this thing and do a return trip. Now, for the actual return trip, now that we're actually up here, this is basically what we're going to be bringing back. Now, because we can store science in the node, we're going to be bringing back mostly just our Kerbals and the science. We're not going to bring back the landers, the crafts, or the probes. So the 2 probes that are going here, we're going to leave them. We're going to leave the miner on Duna. It's not meant to actually get out of the atmosphere again. And the Ike lander we're probably going to leave too, although we could bring it back if we wanted to. And of course the 2 Duna landers, those are designed to come back, but we're only going to rendezvous, and then we're going to take the science from them and kind of leave them in orbit. Maybe we'll use them later, but I honestly really doubt we'll ever use them again, other than gathering the science that they're going to be used for initially. So we have the first piece in orbit, and I think it's time to get the second piece, probably. So what are we going to use for the second piece? Well, the second one that's going to be easiest to dock is likely going to be, if we hit new, we'll put this down, we'll go back into our sub-assemblies. This way we can pull the actual piece out easy. And it's going to be the refinery. So what we're going to do is we're going to attach it, and then we're going to change the root node. And we're going to say that this piece is attached to the root node. Now our command C is the root node, and then this is basically the second piece, is what we're saying. So we're going to be bringing this next. And now that that's happened, we can delete the old piece, and it's all good. So we turned a subassembly into a craft just like that. We'll put our landing gear away. I'm going to check the numbers on this to make sure this thing is good. Let's go to Duna. Let's see. On Duna, you have a 6.0 thrust-to-weight ratio. In the atmosphere, you have almost the same. You've got 22k delta V. That's more than enough to land and come back. Even though you're the refiner, you're not really designed to come back. Actually, why did I build this thing so massive? I think I did design it to come back initially, or at least have the option to if it wanted to. Although now that I think about it, that's not necessary because it's not supposed to come back. Huh. Maybe we can actually skim this thing down and take a lot less since it's not supposed to return. We can probably replace these with ore tanks and replace these with parachutes and just use a couple little engines around this big center fuel tank, and that will be enough to get us, or that will be enough so that we can come back. So this thing might need some redesigning because I'm not intending for this to ever leave Duna. I'm intending for it to land where it's supposed to land and then never move from there, since it's going to be refining for us. And now that I think about it, since we are going to have to redo this, let me put this away. I'll rename this as its own craft. We'll call this the Duna Refinery. And before we end the episode, I want to show you guys something that I forgot, because I forgot to show one of the things I built. We'll exit here and we'll go to the spaceplane hangar, because that's where it actually belongs. Now, we have a refinery, we have landers, but if you notice, there was no drill on the refinery, so how are we going to be getting this ore? I mean, we can scan for it, we can refine it, but we still need the ore. Well, I created something over here called the Duna Rover Miner, and if we load that up, then we can see that we have a really nice rover with a bunch of wheels, some drills, a bunch of parachutes, ore tanks, and of course it's got this so it can plug into any craft it needs to, and it's also got a docking port on the back in case it needs to dock to something or something needs to dock to in a more conventional way versus just kind of plugging into anything it needs. And it's got a bunch of wheels that definitely allow it to balance. It balances really well as the engines to keep it to help land it. But we'll just do a little test launch of this just to show you that I'm surprised this thing balances so well with how strangely it's constructed, but it really does work well. Now, one of the tricks was that these drills were actually going really low. So if you look how they go down, their collision mesh actually starts right with that thicker piece. So if you notice a little bit, we're dragging it. So this thing isn't designed to move, but that was actually really bad. And basically, when I put it down, the thing would levitate on them, or not levitate on them, but these two drills would push it up. But now they just do this little bit of grasping. If I were to move too quickly, then what would happen is the drill would actually cause the pilot seat right here to break off. So we're just going to make sure we don't move, although at least it's not as severe as it was. But this thing can move pretty fast. It's almost impossible to flip as far as I've been able to test with it. Simply because it's got so many wheels, it's very difficult. It just did a very strange bounce. Oh, the back wheels broke and now they've become very sticky. Apparently. That's that's kind of silly. So a random accidental bounce, and now the wheels are acting really weird. But of course we can actually see, who are you? Are you an engineer? I don't know who you are. You have to be, because we have flight engineer up, so you are an engineer. Go and fix it for us. We can actually test this thing and its ladders to get back on. So, we'll see. Crew number has... Oh, that's good to know. I'm glad I did a test. We need a level 3 engineer to repair wheels, or at least these wheels. Well, that's good to know. I need to check if Bill's level 3 or if we need to start flying him around a little bit more. And let's make sure that we can climb back up on these ladders. Once they fully extend. And we'll do this final little bit of a test. Let's see. We can't just climb up. That apparently doesn't work. But we should be able to do that climb out feature that was added. So if we hit climb out, we jump right on top, and we're good. Because then we can just hop right back in. So, we need a level 3 engineer. We'll have to work on that. But we'll have to do it next time, I suppose. At least I'll have to check. You know what? Why don't we just do that now? Revert flight, because we don't actually want this thing. We're just simulating its launch, and we've noticed that it needs a little bit of work to be able to repair it. But we have it. It'll mine for us. It can drive around to get to the better ore nodes and then go meet up with the refinery. And we can go and check Bill's... No, we can't check Bill's level until we bring him back. So we'll have to do a bunch of shenanigans. Anyhow, thank you guys for watching. This is PTT GRW signing out.